Today, I want to talk about the idea of letting life shape you. It is day 8 on this PR30 challenge that I am doing. And for those of you that are just tuning in here, the 30-day challenge is facilitated by a man named Pogrob, who speaks so wonderfully about the world of obsession. And what the challenge is a bunch of people all around the world are working alongside each other, supporting each other in recording and uploading a video once a day for 30 days. And the idea is to really nurture your voice and the value that you want to bring out into the world. So because it's been the first week, I can't actually believe it, I thought I'd make today's video about something a bit more personal, kind of celebrating this small but very significant milestone and just how I ended up here and I suppose all the various decisions that landed me in the speaking and coaching world, and I suppose the crux of everything I speak about. So the topic for today is letting life shape you. The art of being malleable. And I know there are two sides to this coin. The one side is being malleable, letting life shape you, letting life grow you, evolve you. But there's also the flip side, right? Where we are perhaps maybe too impressionable or too influenced or swayed too easily by what is going on. And I do recognize that. But right now, what's really relevant to me is the other side of the coin, which is when you give life permission to shape you, it's quite incredible to see how things unfold. So for me, this whole journey, I suppose, really kicked off with my dad becoming terminal with cancer when I was 20. And even before then, I had a very close cousin of mine, Dean, die of cancer when him and I were both 17. So by the time I got to this experience with my dad, my family and I were already entrenched in this really tough process. So my dad became terminal, and at the time, I was finishing up my undergrad degree, majoring in psychology and criminology. And I had this steadfast idea in my head, as we do at that age, of all the things I needed to do to get to where I wanted to go. And where I wanted to go was neuropsychology. I wanted to do my master's, I wanted to do my PhD, and I just had this beautiful checklist laid out in front of me. And then he became terminal and a hospice counselor, the same one actually that helped us with my cousin, was speaking to me about death and dying and life. And he challenged me to drop out and not pursue my studies, at least for that moment in time. And he'd said to me at the time, you know, Dan, what are you going to learn from a textbook that you wouldn't learn here tenfold? And he could see it, right? I think he could see the deep interest in people that I had, the career that I so fondly spoke of or dreamt of. And then he saw the parallel in front of me, which was my dad dying. I mean, that stuff that textbooks don't teach you. And I decided to take his advice and I dropped out. I actually have goosebumps thinking about it now, because I had no idea what that one decision would do for me. But at the time, I felt like a complete failure. All my friends went on to do their honors in psychology, and I was doing nothing. And I say that with a smirk because, my gosh, was I doing everything and then some in a more zoomed out, life school, life university way. And I felt awful. every second of the day, because people would then say to me, well, how are you filling your time? Because we're not taught about death and dying. No one really knows what it looks like. We see versions of it on movies, but I mean, that's not the real thing. And if you haven't experienced it for yourself, it's a great naivety to have, because when you're in it, it's a completely all-encompassing experience. And my dad was at home in the last couple of months of his life, so myself and my mom were his primary caregivers, and we took on everything. I mean, my mom was unreal in kind of holding down the fort, and then I tended to my dad on a mental, emotional, and spiritual level as much as I could at that age, right? But what I did feel so strongly in me, in leaning into what this man Cameron had advised me, and into leaning into what was right in front of me, what I did feel was this intense pull towards letting life shape me. And I remember my dad actually saying to me, and at the time it was quite hurtful, but saying to me that my surety or confidence, can't remember the word exactly, but that it scared him. He didn't like it. He didn't actually want to be around me some days because of it. I think because I was calm and I was strong and I was sure in this very uncertain, scary time. And I think that was very confronting for a dying man. But the certainty that I had was in this surrendering to, okay, like, I will be malleable, like, life, do your thing, whatever you've got to do your thing. And it's not to say that there's no awful days. Obviously, those are still and will forever be some of the worst days of my life, the hardest days. But there's a trust that you have in things will ultimately work out in your favor. And I know for myself, but I think we think favor has more of a positive connotation. So it's almost like a good thing or a benefit, and then we start feeling resistant to that, because how can you say that it's a benefit or it's a good thing? How is this in my favor? My dad is dying. But in your favor felt like the world is not against you. Your life is not against you. And if you allow it and you give it permission, it works in your favor, and that ultimately, if you move with grace, ultimately things work out. And I know that sometimes we're just like, damn it, man, I don't want to learn any more lessons. Like, I'm good, thank you. You don't need to teach me a lesson today. But I think that resistance, if we can allow ourselves to overcome it again and again, and just surrender to, this journey of life, and we're obviously now going into a very philosophical space, but this journey of life is really one big, ever-evolving, dynamic lesson that just ebbs and flows in various forms of intensity throughout a period of time. And if you deeply accept that, like radically accept that, everything else becomes somewhat easier, because you're not moving against the tides. And it's almost like you then have an ear to the ground all the time to be like, okay, what's really going on here? Or what is this bringing up in me? Or what is this inviting me to release or let go of? And I know that as humans, we suffer unnecessarily because we cling. We like white knuckle cling to things that aren't ours, that aren't meant for us, to the past, to people, to experiences, to dreams that don't quite fit anymore. And ultimately, I know that suffering, deep suffering, comes from a resistance to acceptance. Again, acceptance doesn't mean good in the sense of complacent or a lack of pain or grief or fear. Acceptance is more of an allowing and a trust. And that trust can look different. I mean, whether you're religious or spiritual or all of the above or none of the above, I think if nothing else, if you trust in yourself, even if you are relatively autonomous in your thinking in that way, you can still trust in yourself and your ability to carry yourself forward. So I think that permission and that ability to let yourself be malleable and to move with the tides is the most profound and phenomenal foundation that you can build your life on, because I find we as humans generally get so attached to the narrative and the story. You know, he said this and then this happened and then she did that and then my boss this and my wife and my kids, and it's these stories, right? So we go round and round in circles and we spend all of our energy fixating on this particular story, and then we move and then there's this story, and then we get caught in all the details of these narratives. Whereas if you just zoom out enough, what underpins all of those stories are belief systems and values and principles and philosophy and greater visions and missions for our life that if you can come to peace with or come to terms with or accept or let go of or embrace more higher level concepts within your life, then these small fires or grievances or frustrations tend to all get put out simultaneously. It's like there's this golden thread often that's running through all of them. But we are so fixated on that difficulty in front of us that we've got these blinkers on and we're just not allowing ourselves a chance to step back and to put down the weapons and the defensiveness and think, what's actually really going on here? And I think if a lot of us did that, we would realize that all of the niggles that we're feeling, at least, you know, a lot of them would all relate to each other and they would all come down to a common theme or a common defense or a common belief, that if you tended to that belief or value or narrative or pattern of behavior or habitual way of thinking, if you tended to that overarching concept, then naturally all those fires would be put out. And that's where the acceptance, radical acceptance thing comes in for me, is that if you tend to that as an overarching philosophy in your life, you'll find, no doubt, that a lot of the fires in your life would be put out, or at the very least, their flames would drastically reduce. And I think if we can nurture those philosophies, then we can have way less suffering and allow ourselves to propel forward. So yeah, letting life shape you. It's something, it is, and I get teary every time. But yeah, I mean, the biggest gift my dad gave me was in his death. And that's why we don't get to choose what happens to us, because obviously I would have chosen that he would have lived. And in choosing that, I would have sacrificed or not received all of what came from that experience. So let life shape you. It's well worth it.